Nobody wants to hear this, but somebody has to say it. PC prices in 2026 are not just a little higher than they were a year ago. They are significantly, painfully, and in some cases shockingly higher, and the reasons behind those increases are not temporary blips that will fix themselves in a few months. This is a real and sustained shift in what it costs to build or buy a computer, and if you are planning any kind of PC purchase or upgrade in 2026, you need to understand exactly what is happening and why before you spend a single dollar. So let us get into the ugly truth about PC prices right now, because the picture is more complicated and more important than most coverage is giving it credit for. Let us start with the numbers because the numbers tell the story more clearly than anything else. Compared to just 12 months ago, DDR5 RAM kits are between 15 and 30% more expensive depending on the capacity and configuration you are looking at. SSDs at popular 2 and 4 terabyte capacity points have seen price increases in the same range. Complete pre-built desktop systems from major manufacturers including Lenovo, Dell, HP, Acer, and Asus are being priced 15 to 20% higher than equivalent configurations from a year ago. Laptop prices are following the same direction with similar or in some cases even steeper percentage increases. IDC, one of the most respected technology market research firms in the world, is projecting overall PC prices to rise by 4 to 8% across the board in 2026 on top of increases that have already happened. Some analyst projections for specific component categories are even more pessimistic, with certain memory configurations potentially seeing price increases approaching 35% before the current cycle peaks. These are not small adjustments. These are the kind of price moves that meaningfully change what you can afford for a given budget and what you have to spend to get a given level of performance. The single biggest driver behind all of these price increases is something that most PC buyers have never had to think about before: the artificial intelligence infrastructure boom. The explosion of AI development and deployment happening globally right now is consuming memory and storage resources at a scale and pace that the industry was genuinely not prepared for. Training the large language models that power the AI tools millions of people now use every day requires enormous quantities of the fastest and highest capacity memory and storage available. Running those models at commercial scale for hundreds of millions of simultaneous users requires even more, and the companies building this AI infrastructure have budgets and urgency levels that individual PC buyers simply cannot compete with. When a hyperscale cloud provider or an AI company needs to secure supply of high bandwidth memory or high capacity and flash storage, they are not comparison shopping and waiting for sales. They are signing large contracts, paying premium prices, and taking as much supply as they can get. The memory manufacturers who supply both the enterprise AI market and the consumer PC market are responding to those economic incentives exactly as you would expect them to, by prioritizing the higher margin enterprise customers and leaving the consumer market to compete for whatever production capacity remains. To understand why this problem is not going away quickly, you need to understand how memory and storage is actually manufactured. NAND flash, which powers every SSD you can buy, and DRAM, which powers your system RAM, are both produced in enormous and extraordinarily expensive fabrication facilities that take years to build and billions of dollars to construct. You cannot simply turn on more production capacity because demand has increased and prices have risen. The lead time between deciding to build new fab capacity and actually having sellable product coming out of that fab is measured in years, not months. Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron, and the other major memory manufacturers approved capacity expansion investments in response to the current shortage, but the timeline for that new capacity to meaningfully flow through to consumer retail prices is well into 2027 at the earliest by most serious estimates. Until that new supply arrives in meaningful volume, the shortage conditions driving current prices will persist regardless of how much consumers want prices to come back down. The AI demand story is only part of what is driving PC prices higher in 2026. Tariffs and trade policy changes have added another significant layer of cost pressure that is being passed directly to consumers. The ongoing trade tensions between major economies have resulted in new and revised tariff structures that affect PC components and finished systems moving across international borders. A significant portion of PC manufacturing and component production involves supply chains that cross multiple international borders multiple times between raw materials and finished products, and every tariff adds cost at each crossing. Those costs accumulate through the supply chain and arrive at the retail level as higher prices that end consumers pay. Major PC manufacturers have been very explicit about this in their communications with retail partners and investors, warning of price increases directly attributable to tariff impacts on top of the memory and storage shortage-driven increases. The combination of both forces hitting simultaneously is what is producing the particularly sharp price environment consumers are experiencing in 2026. The Windows 10 end-of-life situation is adding yet another dimension to the PC price pressure story that deserves direct attention. Microsoft officially ended support for Windows 10 in October 2025, which means that the enormous installed base of Windows 10 PCs around the world is no longer receiving security updates. For many users, this creates a genuine and urgent need to upgrade to hardware that can run Windows 11, which has stricter minimum hardware requirements than Windows 10 did. Processors need to support TPM 2.0. Certain older CPU generations are simply not supported by Windows 11 regardless of their actual performance capability. The result is that millions of users who have been happily running perfectly functional computers on Windows 10 are suddenly facing hardware upgrade pressure that has nothing to do with their PC being slow or inadequate for their actual workloads and everything to do with software support policy. This wave of forced hardware refreshes is adding demand pressure to the PC market at exactly the moment when supply constraints and tariff pressures are pushing prices up. More buyers competing for products in a constrained and more expensive supply environment is not a recipe for price relief. What does all of this mean in practical terms for someone who needs to buy a PC or upgrade their current system in 2026? The first and most important thing to understand is that the price environment you are buying into right now is unlikely to improve meaningfully in the near term. The supply chain constraints have known and long timelines for resolution. The tariff situation is politically complex and not obviously heading toward quick resolution. The Windows 10 end-of-life demand wave is real and ongoing. Anyone telling you that prices are about to come back down significantly in the next 3 to 6 months is not being supported by the data and analysis coming from people who understand these markets deeply. If you genuinely need to upgrade or build a PC, making a thoughtful and well-researched purchase at current market prices is almost certainly better than waiting for price relief that available evidence suggests is many months away at minimum. For consumers trying to stretch their budget as far as possible in this difficult pricing environment, there are real strategies worth considering. The pre-built versus self-build calculation has shifted in interesting ways because of the current component pricing environment. Large PC manufacturers with significant purchasing scale and long-term supply agreements can often source components at costs that differ from retail pricing, which means that pre-built systems from major brands occasionally offer better value than building an equivalent system from individually purchased components at current retail prices. This is not always true, and it requires actually doing the math for specific configurations, but it is worth checking rather than assuming that self-building always wins on value the way it historically has during periods of normal component pricing. Timing your purchases around sales events and promotional pricing windows remains one of the most effective strategies for getting better value in any market environment, including the current one. Even in a broadly rising price market, retailers periodically run genuine promotions that represent real savings relative to everyday pricing. Setting up price tracking alerts for specific components you are planning to purchase costs nothing and can save meaningful money by helping you identify and act on those temporary value windows when they appear. The key is having done your research in advance so that when a good promotion appears you can recognize it as genuinely good value and act on it quickly rather than missing it while you try to figure out whether the deal is actually as good as it looks. The RAM and SSD components of any PC build or upgrade deserve specific strategic attention given the current shortage dynamics. For RAM, the sweet spot of 32 GB has become the standard for a capable modern system, and getting there sooner rather than later is supported by where memory prices are heading. If you are currently running 16 GB and experiencing real performance limitations in your actual workloads, the case for upgrading now rather than waiting is strong. For SSDs, the 2 TB capacity point offers the best combination of value and practical utility for most users, and prices at that capacity point are unlikely to improve meaningfully. In the near term, based on NAND flash market dynamics, buying the storage you genuinely need now is more financially sound than waiting for a price environment that supply chain evidence does not support expecting soon. It is also worth thinking honestly about what you actually need from a PC in 2026 rather than what marketing and enthusiast communities might lead you to believe you need. The performance gulf between a genuinely good mid-range PC and a top-of-the-line enthusiast build is enormous in specifications and price, but in real world daily use for the workloads most people actually run, the difference in experience performance is often much smaller than the price difference would suggest. In a market where prices are elevated across the board, being precise and honest about your actual performance needs rather than aspirational or speculative needs is one of the most financially effective things you can do. A well-configured mid-range system built around current generation components will handle gaming at 1-for-4 OP, content creation at professional quality levels, and any productivity workload you can throw at it at a substantially lower price point than a maximum specification build that delivers marginal real-world improvement for most users. The longer-term picture for PC prices is worth keeping in mind even as you navigate the immediate purchasing decisions you face. The memory shortage and its associated price pressures are expected to ease as new production capacity comes online through 2027. Tariff situations have historically been more dynamic than they initially appear and trade relationships can shift in ways that reduce cost pressure over time. The Windows 10 refresh wave will eventually complete as the installed base of unsupported hardware works its way through the upgrade cycle. None of these things will happen on short timelines, but the current price environment is not necessarily the permanent new baseline for PC hardware costs. Building or buying a PC today means accepting current market pricing, but it does not mean accepting those prices forever as your upgrade costs into the future. The ugly truth about PC prices in 2026 is that they are genuinely high. The reasons are real and not quickly fixable, and consumers are right to be frustrated by the situation. AI infrastructure demand, tariff impacts, supply chain constraints, and forced hardware refresh cycles have combined to create one of the more difficult PC purchasing environments in recent memory. But difficult does not mean impossible to navigate intelligently. Understanding why prices are high, having realistic expectations about when and how much relief might come, applying smart purchasing strategies around timing and configuration choices, and being honest about your actual needs versus speculative wants are all tools available to you as a buyer. The PC industry will work through the current constraints over time. In the meantime, go in with your eyes open, your research done, and your budget matched realistically to the market you are actually buying in. The GPU segment of the PC market deserves its own focused discussion because graphics card pricing in 2026 has its own complicated story layered on top of the broader component price increases affecting the rest of the system. NVIDIA's RTX 5000 series launched at price points that genuinely surprised even experienced hardware enthusiasts who were expecting premium pricing. The RTX 5080 and 5090 represent the highest launch prices for mainstream flagship consumer GPUs in recent memory, and even the more mainstream RTX 5070 and 5060 tier cards launched at prices that represented meaningful increases over their previous generation equivalents. AMD's competing RX 9000 series has offered better value at several price points, which has helped create some competitive pressure that has moderated the very worst pricing outcomes for consumers. But the overall GPU market in 2026 is still significantly more expensive than it was 2 years ago across most tiers. For anyone building a gaming PC in 2026, the GPU is typically the single most expensive component in the build, and the elevated pricing in that segment alone is enough to push complete build costs meaningfully higher than equivalent performance would have cost in previous years. The cooling and power supply segments have also seen price increases that are less dramatic than memory and GPU pricing but still meaningful in the context of a complete build budget. The power requirements of modern high-end GPUs have increased substantially, with top-tier graphics cards now drawing 300, 400, or even more watts under full load. That increased power demand means that power supplies adequate for previous generation builds may be undersized for current generation hardware, forcing upgrades to higher wattage units that inevitably cost more. High-quality power supply units at the wattage levels needed for current top-tier builds have seen price increases driven by both component costs and demand from the gaming and content creation market. Similarly, the cooling requirements for modern high-power GPUs and high-core count processors have pushed enthusiasts toward more capable and correspondingly more expensive cooling solutions to keep their hardware running at safe temperatures under sustained load. The laptop market has its own version of the 2026 price pressure story that affects an even larger number of consumers than the desktop PC market does. Most people who buy computers buy laptops rather than desktop systems, and the price increases in the laptop segment are hitting the broadest possible audience of everyday consumers. Memory shortage impacts affect laptops just as they affect desktop systems, since laptops use the same underlying DRAM and NAND flash technology. Tariff impacts on finished goods affect laptops even more directly than desktop components, since laptops are typically assembled as complete systems and shipped internationally as finished products, making them directly subject to finished goods tariff rates in ways that individual desktop components may not be. The combination of these pressures means that laptop buyers in 2026 are facing some of the most challenging value propositions in recent years, with prices at every tier having moved meaningfully higher, while performance improvements within a given price band have been more modest than in previous upgrade cycles. One genuinely useful reframe for PC buyers navigating the current difficult market is to think carefully about the actual useful life and total cost of ownership of any system they build or buy, rather than just focusing on the upfront purchase price. A well-chosen PC built in 2026 at current elevated prices will provide 3, 4, 5, or more years of useful service depending on your workloads and upgrade expectations. When you spread the higher upfront cost across the full useful life of the system, the monthly cost of ownership looks different and more manageable than the sticker shock of current prices might suggest. Building or buying a capable and Well-balanced system today that will serve your needs reliably for several years is a sound approach even in an elevated price environment, and resisting the temptation to wait indefinitely for better prices that available evidence suggests are many months away prevents you from losing productive use of a capable system in the meantime.